Welcome to a tutorial on how to import comma-separated value files on Excel spreadsheets into FlexBI. The first thing you're going to need to even accomplish this is some kind of text editing software or a spreadsheet program. I'm going to be performing this demonstration on Excel, which I'm sure most of you already have, so feel free to follow along and do as I instruct. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be creating a file that imports budgets for quarters into FlexBI. What we're going to need to accomplish this is to attach the data to certain dimensions. And to do this, we're going to have to create columns which correspond to the columns you have in FlexBI. So what we're going to do now is create 4 columns in a header file, not a header file, header row. We're going to have a time column, which is going to correspond to the time dimension. We're going to have an account column, which once again corresponds to the accounts dimension in FlexBI. We're going to have object type department, which corresponds to the object type a department object in FlexBI that we have on our demo data. And the reason why we're making this file is the budget column, which does not exist in FlexBI, but we're going to make it exist. What we need to do now is add values for all of this. We need to add time. We're going to add 2012 January 1st. And as you can see, something has gone horribly wrong because Excel changed my format. It shouldn't be doing this. I didn't want it to do that, but it did it anyway. So what you need to do to not allow it to do this is change the data format. Like so. The reason why you should do this is because spreadsheet programs like to format data to make it more appealing to the user, which in turn makes it more difficult for other programs to interpret this data. For instance, here we had Excel change the date format to a date that FlexBI does not support. That's why we need to make sure that the cell I have entered the data in is interpreted as text, and therefore it does not feel the need to format it in any way. The same thing applies to numbers, because Excel sometimes formats 4000 with a comma in between, 1000 separator, if you will. And the FlexBI will interpret this data as 4 and 3 zeros. And this will also move your columns one column further, where you do not have a column specified, or God help you move this data into a column that exists and assigns data that does not belong into that column to data in FlexBI. So be careful when you do this. Always make sure to change the data formats to text. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to need 13 rows, I believe. No, I'm going to need 9 rows, which I'm going to change the format to text so we don't have this issue anywhere. So let's enter the date again. As you can see now, it stayed the way it was supposed to stay, which is good. That is what we want. Now I'm going to enter the starting dates for each quarter. So FlexBI can interpret this data and assign it to each quarter with its starting date. Now, onto the accounts column, we're going to have to enter the account number to which we want this data to be assigned to. We're going to assign this to account 100. We're going to add this account into all of the columns. Now we're going to need to add the object type. What you need to add here is the object type code, which in FlexBI is this for the demo data. In FlexBI, most object types have a name similar to this. Let's say department 1, something like this. The first part is the code, the second part is the object type's name. This would be the name, and this would be the code. Always make sure you enter the code, because FlexBI won't recognize if you enter the full name of the object type. So let us continue adding the data here for the object types, and now we can enter the budgets. This is where you come in, because you're creating this file to add the budgets yourself. This is going to be new data in FlexBI. Therefore, you can add whatever you want in here, of course, as long as it's a number. We're just going to add these numbers. They don't really mean anything. It is just an example. So we have added the data for all of the quarters of 2012 on account 100 for the object type department 1. And now you will be able to see the budgets for every quarter in FlexBI for these two things. What if I want to add budgets for object type 2? Easy. You copy all of this and you paste it under it. Like so. All you have to do here is you need to change it to department 2. No problem. Of course, change the budgets accordingly, because we don't want to see the same data. Unless, of course, you have the same data. And just for kicks, we're going to add department 3 as well, just to have some more data to work with. Let's make it 3,000 for everything. And there we go, the file is done. Now, all you need to do is save it. Let's save it as 2012 budgets. And now all we have to do is go to FlexBI, go into your source data tab, source files. You browse to your file that you just created, you open it, you upload it. Now, as you can see here, it does not recognize the Hansa World file. That's normal, because it isn't. And we see a new button here, which is the button preview. Now let's press this button, and a new screen opens up. It might look intimidating at first, but it's nothing too tough to comprehend. So I'll take you through this thing step by step. The first thing you always need to do is select the cube you're going to be putting all this data into. In our case, the financials cube. The second thing you're going to have to do is check if the amount of header rows is correct. Right now, it is. I'm going to show you what happens when it isn't. If I set it to 0, the column names are now going to be imported. That is incorrect. Shouldn't do that. If I select it as 2, what happens? Chops off the first row of data we had. Also incorrect. Always double check it. Always. Now, moving on to these buttons, this will generate the default dimension and level names from column field names. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work quite like you'd want it to. That's why you always double check. And this will hide unmapped columns. As you can see here, it has hidden everything. The second thing you need to do, not the second thing, that will be the fourth thing. You need to check the data type fields. For time, the data type is indeed date. For the account, even though it's a number, it's not an integer, it's a string. Remember that? It's important. The next thing you need to do is select the string for object type department, which is a string, and for budget, it is indeed an integer. Let's move on to dimensions. Now, this is important. This is where all your data is going to go. For time, it's not going to go into the accounts. It's going to go in time. The accounts, however, are going to go in accounts. The object type department, that's going to be object, a department object. Redundant, I know. Budget, where is budget going to go? Measures, of course. As you can see, it has even automatically generated a new measure name for us. You can also rename this whatever you want. We're going to rename this Budget 2012. Now, the next thing is advanced options. These are important for accounts and object types because these two columns are the important columns to which you're going to attach your budget data to. So make sure they are both key columns and that you skip the missing columns. That's about it, really. But wait, what is this? Why are there null values here? What does this mean? What is this mess over here? It's nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. They are there because previously I demonstrated something by writing here. Excel interprets that there's some kind of data still there, but as you can see, there's nothing there. It's just empty cells of data. Completely harmless. They will not tamper with your data in any way. As you can see, FlexBI hasn't even assigned any kind of column or mapping to those columns. So it's fine. So we're just gonna carry on with the import. As you can see, no errors have popped up. Now we're gonna wait, make sure everything is imported correctly, which it has, 12 rows. Let's do the math. 3 times 4, indeed 12. Moving on to the Analyze tab and the Financials queue. Let's see what we have done here. We're going to select the measures. We're going to open them up. And what is this? We have Budget and Budget 2012. Now this is the one we created. Let's see what's in there. We can even rename it if we want. But this cannot be changed because it comes from your file. You have created this. It is your own creation. Now, let's make sure there's actually something in this. We're going to take the balance off. Actually, no, we're going to keep it on to make sure everything's actually working correctly. Now, first things first, let's see what we attach the data to. Accounts. Let's select some accounts. We're going to go into the accounts field. We can see there's Budget 2012 in there, and there's a balance. That's good. Let's see where it actually went to. It's in income accounts. Okay, which one of the accounts is it attached to? Account 100, sales audio, right there. As you can see, the data we defined here corresponds to where it has been put. Now, we're going to select this to make things easier for us. And now we're going to check if the data is indeed correct. We are going to go into all times. We're going to scroll our way to 2012. As we can see, the data is here. It's in 2012, but is it in 2009? No, it isn't. Good. What about 2013? Also good. The data went into the right time. Now, let's open up 2012. Check out the quarters. There's data in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. There's no balance in quarter 4. But that's okay, because we didn't enter balance. Someone else did. Now, let's make sure that our data is connected to the object type. Let's open up all of the objects. And what do we see here? We have department 1, 2, and 3. All of them have budgets attached to them. This is good. Let's double check if it's all in the right places. Yes, yes, and yes. Everything appears to be working correctly. And that is how you import, let's say, a budget for your data. Now, another thing I'm going to show you today is how to create a property for some data. We're going to have to create a new spreadsheet for that. Now the reason why someone would want to do this is, let's say you have a department, and in Flex BI you want to see who is in charge of that department. But you can't really get that information out of the data you have in Hansa World. So you're going to manually enter that data into a file, and you're just going to import it into Flex BI, attach the name as a property, and you're going to have it right there for everyone to see. But just for fun, we're also going to add an email. We'll make 2 properties. No problem. So, what are we going to need to do this? We're going to need 3 columns. We're going to need the departments. We're going to need a name of the person in charge of that department. And we're going to need their email. So, let's start creating the columns. We're going to need object type department. We're going to need a name and an email. Well, that's the header done. Quite easy, isn't it? Next thing we're going to need is department 1, department 2, and department 3. Okay, so far so good. Now we're going to enter the people in charge. We're going to have Bob Arnold. We're going to have Mike Huzit and John Blue. 3 people, 3 departments. Now, their emails. How do I contact these people? Bob Arnold at company.com. Excellent. Mike Huzit at business.com. Outstanding. And John Blue at enterprise.net. Look at that. And that's that. The file is done. Once again, quite easy. No problems here. We're going to have to save this as people in charge. Excellent. Now, back to Flex BI, source data, source files. Click on the Browse button, and you browse to the file you just created. You open it up. You upload it. It's right here. Once again, press the preview button, go into the column mapping. Now, try to remember what I told you previously, the steps of how to make this work properly. You select the cube, financials, in our case. Check the amount of header rows. Correct. Don't tamper with the buttons. There's nothing to tamper with. Check the data types. 3 strings. We had 3 strings, all as well. Select the dimensions. Now, we have that. But here we also need to enter the department object dimension, because that's where our property is gonna go. Same with the email. That's where it's gonna go. What we're gonna have to do now is we're gonna have to also add a level. Well, not really a level, but more of a measure, which is gonna help us retrieve the name and email of our department heads. What we need to do now is enter advanced options for all of these columns. Remember, object dimensions always need to be a key column that skip missing values. For the name and email, since they are property columns, we need to enter a property name for them. The name is going to be named name, and the email is going to be named email. And that's that. We can import the file. Once again, make sure it imports correctly. We don't want any surprises. Like this. Something has gone wrong. Let's go see what we did wrong. What I'm guessing went wrong is that I didn't add a level here. So didn't really know where to put that data. Let's test it again. Is it correct? It is correct now. So make sure you always add a measure when importing properties. Now, let's make sure it actually imported them. Just because it says it imported doesn't mean it did. It could have imported empty rows. That also sometimes happens with these Excel and comma separated value files, that it also interprets empty rows as rows that need to be imported. It of course imports them, but it doesn't actually add any values into FlexBI. But it still counts as an imported row. So always double check your data, people. Now, moving on, let's select the object dimensions, object, a department object. Now, let's open it up. All of our departments are still there. But where are our newly created measures? They're not here. It's because they're in calculated measures. You can see a name and an email. Let's test if they work. A name works fine. Our email also works wonderfully. Now, another thing I'm going to show you real quick is how you can make both of these properties appear in a single measure. Because sometimes you don't want 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 columns. You want one. Of course, it might not look as pretty, but it's still compact. We're going to create a new calculated member. We're going to call it property, except it's not a property, it's properties, it's plural. Now what we need to do is on the right side, we're going to scroll to other dimensions, and we're going to select object, a department object, so it pastes the name in correctly. Always remember, if you can press a button here, always do it. Do not try to guess the names of dimensions and members, because there's a high likelihood you can get it wrong and your calculated member formula will not work correctly. Now, enter a dot and enter all properties. This will display all of the properties available for the department object that is in that row. Let's press create. Didn't throw any errors. That's good. Let's open it up. You can see a new member is here. And it's displaying all of the available properties that these objects have. And as we can see here, we have all of the appropriate people and their emails displayed in this column, like so.